In this video, I'm going to show you how to get your brand mentioned and cited by AI using strategies that are working great right now. Specifically, you're going to see how to get brand mentions that LLMs train on. Why is this so important? Well, AI tools don't rank pages the same way Google does. They choose which brands, tools, and sources to bring up when someone asks a question. And most of those signals that influence that choice happen off of your site. I've seen this play out directly firsthand. Two companies that I started, Backlinko and Exploding Topics, now show up inside AI overviews and ChatGPT for a growing number of high-intent prompts. I'm not telling you this just as a humble brag. It's to show you that what I'm about to share with you gets results today. Now, I should point out that to get these results, I didn't spend a minute on new markup, chunking, LLMs.txt, or a lot of the so-called AI strategies out there that may or may not get results. Instead, I earned these AI rankings because the same descriptions kept appearing in places like this. Over time, these patterns add up to mentions in AI answers, which led to more leads and customers for me and my business. The good news is that you don't need to be a big brand to do this stuff. You just need to show up in the right places with the same positioning over and over again. With that in mind, let's get into the first actionable step, which is to get included in existing best of and comparison content pages. This is one of the fastest ways to get your brand picked up by AI systems. Why? Pages like best tools for X, top platforms for Y, and X versus Y comparisons are primed for LLM training, which makes sense if you think about it. These pages rank, they get traffic, and they're usually cited by AI systems. For example, here's Exploding Topics getting mentioned first for a high-intent AI prompt. As you can see from the list of sources, ChatGPT used this best of post as a source. So yeah, your goal is to get mentioned in as many of these best of lists as possible. Here's how to do it. First, you want to find these comparison or best of pages. You can search for things like the best tool in your category, software like yours, or the alternative to a competitor in your space. For example, Exploding Topics is a trend spotting tool that I started a few years ago. And because we promoted the site pretty actively, we got featured in a ton of best of lists. For example, here's a list of trend spotting tools. See how Exploding Topics is mentioned on that list? This helps reinforce that Exploding Topics is one of the best trend spotting tools on the market. Now, obviously, you can and should create a list just like this on your own site. In fact, we did exactly that, as you can see here. But for LLMs to trust the association between your brand and a specific use case, they need to see this association happen on third-party sites too. One of the best ways to find these pages is just to prompt different LLMs with best of questions and see which pages they cite. Those pages are ideal for this step. Next, you want to reach out to the author or whoever is in charge of that page. And you want this outreach to be super simple and short. You don't need a pitch deck or a 1,000-word email to get the point across. Instead, just send a short note that's brief, factual, and free of hype. Basically, you just want to describe what your product or service is and who it's for. The goal is to make it a no-brainer for them to add your brand to the list. So unlike old school SEO, your focus is more on getting the right description, even if the link is no follow or missing entirely. Bonus points if the page you're targeting has a resource that's missing or broken, or is mentioning something that's fallen off in quality. That way you can get your foot in the door by suggesting that they replace that old resource with yours. In fact, a while back, Google depreciated an old free tool that was somewhat related to Exploding Topics. So someone from my team reached out to site owners that listed Google Correlate on best of lists. Specifically, we let them know that they had a tool on their list that no longer existed. And as you can see here, people were super receptive to our outreach because we added value first. Even though Exploding Topics wasn't a direct replacement for Google Correlate, it was still close enough to land us several mentions on authority sites. Which leads us to step number 2, which is to show up where people ask for recommendations. Now, after comparison pages, the next most important place to show up is where people ask for suggestions on what tool should I use for, or what service should I use for X. Specifically, I'm talking about places like Reddit threads, core questions, and niche forums and communities. People use these places to make decisions all the time. And AI systems learn from the answers that show up in these discussions. So here's how to do this without being spammy. First, you only want to reply to very high intent, specific questions. In other words, you want to find a thread where someone's looking for exactly what you sell or do. So you want to look for threads where someone says, what are the best tools for this? Or is this tool or service worth it? Or what are some alternatives to this thing I'm using now? Here's an example. If the question is vague, theoretical, or not really directly related to what you do, skip it. Otherwise, you need to force your brand mention into the thread, which is a fast way to get banned. Second, you want to keep your answer pretty grounded and non-hypey. In other words, you want to explain in simple English what you use, why you use it, when it makes sense, and when it doesn't. Here's an example. Basically, you just want to come off as a user giving their 2 cents as opposed to a salesperson that's pitching their product. Third, you want to use a similar description of your product and service each and every time. Unlike old school Google SEO, the wording really matters here. That's because if you describe your brand with the same or similar phrasing over and over again, LLMs make the connection between your brand and the problem that you solve. And that leads us to step number 3, which is to use press releases to reinforce consistent positioning. Press releases can play a role in getting AI brand mentions, but it's important to keep your expectations realistic in terms of how well press releases work for this. In most cases, the press release that you put out won't get picked up outside of the service that you use. But if you're focusing on AI SEO instead of public relations, that's no big deal. That's because the main value of a press release today is that it lets you write a clear, neutral description of what your brand does, who it's for, and how best to describe it. And once you send out the release, that same wording can show up in different places, like on your website, or in outreach to comparison pages, in Reddit and Quora answers, and in emails to writers or journalists. For example, a while back, we published this press release for Backlinko. See this clean explanation of what we do? That's the same phrasing that we reused in lots of other places, which, along with actually using that description in lots of other places, helps Backlinko show up for lots of prompts related to SEO training. So yeah, the thing to keep in mind about press releases is this. The press release itself is not a super strong signal on its own, but the repeated use of the same description in several different places online is. And that's why press releases can help with your AI visibility over time. Which leads us to step number 4, build a content machine. Honestly, of all the things I'm going to talk about in this video, this is the most important strategy for ranking in LLMs. As Mike King pointed out, winning an AI search is fundamentally a content strategy problem, not a technical problem. In other words, you need your business to be a content machine. On your site, on your own channels, and you need to get other people talking about you, like affiliates, earned media, and people on Reddit. You can use LLMs.txt and chunk your content till you're blue in the face. But nothing works for AI SEO like building a legit brand that people naturally talk about. Let me show you a real-life example of how we did this for my SaaS startup, Exploding Topics. When I first launched our site, we had an interesting little trend spotting tool, but not much else. And being a bootstrap startup, we didn't have a huge marketing budget. So we did a few early critical steps that helped us get mentioned all over the place. For example, here's a random Reddit thread mentioning Exploding Topics. And here's a prominent feature in a high traffic blog post. I had nothing to do directly with these links and mentions. They happen naturally as a byproduct of having a content machine. So with that, let's get into the details. First, we made the somewhat crazy decision to offer a limited version of our tool for free. Now, obviously, a free pricing tier is nothing new or crazy, but that's not what we did. Instead of a free tier, we literally just made the free version publicly available. No login, no password, anyone could just drop in and see hundreds of awesome trends for free. This helped our brand get featured on places like Product Hunt pretty much on day one. Next, we started a weekly newsletter early on. And like most newsletters, we started with 0 subscribers. But using a combination of organic and paid traffic, we built it up to tens of thousands of subs. And needless to say, getting our brand in front of thousands of people every Tuesday when we sent our newsletter was huge. Our newsletter made Exploding Topics top of mind whenever someone was going to discuss or write about trend spotting. Lastly, we launched a YouTube channel. Again, this was another place for us to mention our brand alongside key terms like trend spotting. See how this works? If you don't build a content machine like this, you're going to be manually building listicle mentions and dropping Reddit comments for the rest of your life. Instead, the Exploding Topics brand gets mentions basically automatically 24/7 without me needing to do any manual work. Not only is this much more scalable, but I also think AI tools see this as more natural than a lot of the DIY stuff. Fortunately, it's easy to get started. Although to be clear, it will take consistency over time to see results. Your first step is to decide on a main platform to publish on. This could be a blog, YouTube channel, IG page, Twitch stream, or anywhere else where your audience hangs out. Next, consistently publish content on that channel that provides value first and pitches your product or service second. Then you want to redistribute that same content on other platforms. You can take a blog post and turn it into a YouTube video, or vice versa. Or take clips from a Twitch stream and turn them into TikTok videos. Or turn a LinkedIn post into an email newsletter. For example, at Exploding Topics, we took this blog post and turned it into a YouTube video and a thread on X. Over time, you basically take a single piece of content and turn it into 5, 10, or even 50 pieces of content over time. So this content machine isn't about producing massive amounts of new content. It's more like create once and distribute forever. So yeah, I just laid out a strategy that you can use to get your brand to show up in more AI answers. Now I'd like to hear from you. Is there any strategy from this video that you want to try first? Or maybe there's something you're already using that's working really well. Either way, leave a comment below and let me know what you think.